Are you someone who feels connected with the land? Or are you someone who enjoys the feeling of being close to the water? Well, if you're an avid fan of Carcassonne, Land vs. Sea is a tile-laying board game that has you literally fighting for space as you create your own unique maps. In this video, we're going to be comparing both games and seeing which of these two tile-laying games is the best in this board game face-off. Let's go! So on my turn, I draw a tile from the stack and use it to extend this road. I then place my meeple out on it to hopefully score this road later on. Well, on my turn, I'm going to place this land tile next to this other land tile, scoring 2 victory points. That's not exactly how you play this game. What you should have done was you should have placed the land tile over here so that you could enclose the land and score 12 victory points. Oh, cheers, bro. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd actually have a lot of difficulty laying tiles, of course. Carcassonne is a tile-laying board game that is considered an all-time classic. Carcassonne is the candy wrapper that advertises the delicious chocolate of modern board gaming encased inside. In Carcassonne, players will take it in turns, drawing a single tile and placing it out, connecting it to the main game area, extending the landscape as they go. It could be extending the road, expanding the city, or building a monastery. Players are then placing meeples out on different landmark features, hoping that when those features are completed, they can score it. For instance, placing a meeple on an open road will score when the road is closed and completed. They're kinda like those fluoro orange safety cones that you see on a construction site. Players will score points for each segment of a closed road that they've completed and claimed. Enclosed cities score 2 points per tile, as well as 2 points each per coat of arms shown in it. It's the thanks you get for protecting the city. Monasteries can earn you up to 9 points if you can completely surround it on all sides. Carcassonne's famous square tiles, medieval theme, simple rule set, and geographical strategy has meant that this has been one of the most perfect games to introduce to brand new players. Let's hold that thought for a sec. What if I told you that there is a board game out there that is simple to teach like Carcassonne and easy to play, but introduces a whole new level of geographical strategy and thinkiness? Land vs. Sea is like Carcassonne's muscular younger brother, fitter, stronger, and possibly more attractive in every way. Just look at how handsome this fine piece of cardboard is. In Land vs. Sea, one player fights for the land and the other the sea. The aim of the game is to place out these land tiles to try and score as many points as possible. The land player will score points whenever these land areas are closed up, and the sea player will score whenever the sea areas are enclosed. The first main difference that you'll notice between the two games is that Land vs. Sea takes the classic square-shaped Carcassonne style land tile and adds 2 extra sides to it to turn it into this very hexy, happy hexagon. By adding 2 extra sides and transforming the tiles itself means that there's an added level of complexity, puzzliness, and it does reshape the geometry and geography of the game itself. Players now in Land vs. Sea can create little C shapes, or little alcoves, or even little holes in the game board itself. This adds for extra decision making and complexity to the layers and the choices that you make on your turn. Throughout the game, each player will have 2 tiles each. On their turn, they will place one out so that the terrain matches the edges of the existing landscape. Players then can trigger any bonus actions if they wish. A play again tile allows a player to put out their other tile, whilst a steal tile allows them to take a tile from another player. At the end of the turn, players draw back up to 2 tiles. One of the simplest and most ingenious design choices that is introduced into Land vs. Sea that I really love is the fact that the land tiles are double-sided. All of a sudden, one side is public knowledge and the other side is private knowledge that only you know about. Ultimately, players are going to be able to have 4 choices on their turn, 2 which could be a surprise, and for me, that's a game changer. Whenever a land area is closed, the land player scores points equal to the number of tiles that were used to make up that land area. If a sea is ever completed, the sea player earns points in the same way. The game ends when the last tile in the stacks has been placed. Whoever has the most points wins. So you might be thinking at this point, that all sounds simple enough, but Danny, where is the strategy and deep thinking that appears in this game? Well, I like to compare it to looking at a fish tank, where when you first glance at the fish tank, it kind of looks like a living ornament or a living ecosystem. It's not until you put your face up against the tank that you get to see all the abundance of life and interactions that happen within it. When you approach a game of land versus sea, you kind of look at it from the out and go, this is a pretty simple tile laying game. It's not until you actually look and put your head up against the glass and see the cornucopia of choices that the game truly presents to you. Whenever a player closes either a sea or land area, they can score bonus points if there are these plus symbols on them, no matter which side you're playing for. You'll also notice on the tiles that there are mountains and corals. These score whenever you place them adjacent to other mountain or coral. The beauty of building chains of coral or mountains is that every time you add a new piece to the chain, the entire chain rescores again. For example, if I place this piece of edge coral here on the map that connects with this piece of edge coral, I get to score 2 victory points because there's 2 pieces of coral touching each other. Later on in the game, if I place another piece with coral on it and slide it into the same chain and connect it together, I get to rescore that entire chain, giving me 3 points the next time I extend it. It's important to note that only the land player can score points for chaining mountains and the sea player can score points for chaining reefs. So when you're placing your land tile out, you've got to be really careful that you don't accidentally give points to the opposing player. Another way to score is to connect ships operated by the sea player and caravans managed by the land player together. Whenever a player places a ship or caravan tile next to another ship or caravan tile, that player gets 2 victory points. Building a cluster of ships and caravans together is important for creating a trade route. Whichever player has the most ships or caravans in a trade route at the end of the game gets to claim and score that entire route, so it is a competition for who can connect the most. Waypoints come in these very nautical themed wooden discs. Oh, not this. I meant this. These get placed out on open terrains on the map that kind of symbolize where players are exploring in this world. Whichever player completes a terrain with a waypoint token on it gets a point. If a waypoint token is ever surrounded by 6 hex tiles, it also earns that player a point. The waypoint markers are there to help entice the opposing players to help you finish off some of your regions. What really impresses me about this game is that as the game plays out, the landscape and geography of it changes and evolves. Because the tiles are hexagonal in shape, you can often find yourself in a situation where holes appear. Wait a sec. There's a hole in my script. Hey, there's holes in these cards. Oh, that's really strange. Wait a minute. There's a hole in this banana. I was talking about a gap in the game. Players can sometimes find themselves in a situation where they're creating these hexagonal shaped holes. If the hole ever has 6 land edges or 6 ocean edges, then the player who placed the final tile that completed the hole gets to gain the power of the volcano and whirlpool tile. What this tile does is it fills in that empty space, meaning that player can score in complete particular regions. It might be scoring a coral reef, gaining bonus points, or completing an area of sea that will swing the game in their favor. It's bound to make any board game completionist really happy, or maybe a dentist who takes pleasure in filling in people's cavities. The tile is literally a masterpiece in hole filling. Whenever a whirlpool or a volcano tile is placed, if this finishes or completes an area, then all of those places score, including the terrain, bonus points, terrain points, as well as the coral and mountain chaining effects. This piece is literally the piece de resistance. If you can successfully use this piece, it can be a game-changing move. Throughout this video, I've mainly spoken about Land vs. Sea being primarily a 2-player game. It does come with a 4-player team variant and a 3-player game mode where one player takes on the role of the cartographer. In the 3-player mode, one person is the cartographer. The rules are essentially the same, except there is a particular play order that players need to follow. The cartographer scores chains of corals and mountains placed by any player, as well as scoring endgame trade routes that have an equal number of ships and caravans. Comparing the strategy that both games have to offer, Carcassonne is all about forward planning and forward thinking. As players place their meeples out on different landforms, they're kind of announcing to the other players how they're going to try and score. It might be completing a castle, completing a really long road, or even surrounding a monastery with other tiles. This public information means that other players on their turn can place their tiles in a way to try and strategically block that player from scoring a lot of points, as well as trying to navigate around that player so that they have to work really hard to try and fill in those geographical gaps. In Land vs. Sea, all of the ways to score is public information. However, the tiles that players hold is semi-public information. The opponent is only ever going to know 50% of the information because the tiles are double-sided. This really provides for some tactical gameplay. One player might be trying to complete a really big land region, and if the other player knows this, they can place a tile down that really opens up that land so that the land player needs to plug them up really quickly. There's a little bit more tactical strategy that appears in Land vs. Sea because of the scope of how the information is shared between players. Players can even combo out in Land vs. Sea by playing a play again tile or a steal tile. Those little minor actions really reshape the game and give you a little bit of an edge over your opponent, and I think that element to it just really appeals to me. I also find that in Land vs. Sea, each player has 4 options on their turn, whereas in Carcassonne, players only have 1 tile and they've got to try and fit that tile where possible on a board where sometimes the options are quite limited. In this version of the game, that is going to really open up the floodgates a little bit and provide players with lots of options on their turn to tactically move around this map, which is ever evolving and dynamic. So ultimately, I would definitely have to say Land vs. Sea is better in this category, but I do know that there are variants out there with Carcassonne where you can play with 2 tiles per turn, where you draw 2 and decide which one you want to place out. In terms of scalability, Carcassonne is a relatively balanced game that plays really well from 2 to 5 players. I really like playing at the higher player count because there's a little bit more social dynamics, it's a bit more tactful, and every piece that you place out really matters. Whereas in Land vs. Sea, this primarily plays best at 2 players, where you're playing head to head. It does have some extra modes, but I don't like sharing my role with other people, so I tend to like playing for myself, so I'm quite competitive in that regards. So I definitely would recommend that if you've only got a significant other or friend that you want to play with, then this is a perfect game for you. But I definitely have to give the award for scalability to Carcassonne. In comparing the mechanics in both games, no one can argue against the classic nature of Carcassonne. It is definitely one of the best gateway games to introduce to new players, and in fact it featured at my wedding as a little guest book where all my guests drew on tiles and the meeples, and every time we play that version, and I call it the wedding version of the game, I really enjoy it. What I really like about Land vs. Sea, however, is that the scoring in here is a lot more dynamic compared to Carcassonne. By chaining and rescoring mountains and coral reefs, you're really using them to create a little combo or engine. I really love the trade route feature that features in Land vs. Sea, where if you've got more ships than the other player, then the sea player will score for that entire trade route by the end of the game. Getting those little extra bonus points and completing the regions and sending waypoint markers back to their owners to get bonus points. There's so many layers of point scoring that really makes your brain really tick over. The base game of Carcassonne really only has the 3 or 4 main ways of scoring that I feel like gets a little bit repetitive and isn't varied enough to make me want to vie for one over the other. I might try to complete the castle and try and incorporate as many shields as possible, but it doesn't feel as dynamic as Land vs. Sea does. So in terms of superior mechanics, I would definitely say Land vs. Sea gets my seal of approval, but I still have a place in my heart for Carcassonne. So don't let this one go. In terms of comparing the theme of both games, I feel like both themes definitely work for the actual gameplay that they're trying to vie for. In Carcassonne, you do feel like you're in the medieval era and you're building this map and you're building your border fortress between France and Spain, and it definitely has a stronger narrative behind it. Whereas Land vs. Sea probably is a bit more of a visual aesthetic where you're seeing patterns of sea and land kind of connect together, but there isn't really a coherent storyline that follows Land vs. Sea. So I would say in terms of theme, Carcassonne definitely gets my seal of approval. So in considering my final verdict, Carcassonne and Land vs. Sea are both really great tile-laying games, and it's worthwhile owning both, one or either, and you certainly won't be disappointed with either choice. However, if I were to pick one of the two, I would definitely pick Land vs. Sea. Mainly because it's smaller, it's more portable, and the rules are a little bit more elevated in this game in terms of the strategy, the choices that you have per turn, as well as the different scoring methods that you encounter throughout the game. The hexagonal shaped tiles really definitely add a new dimension to the game and the puzzly and thinky nature to it. Thank you once again for joining me for another Board Game Sanctuary video. If you really like this video, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and share button, as well as leave a comment in the comment section below as to which of these two board games you would have chosen. If you really want to help support this channel, please consider becoming a Board Game Sanctuary and heading over to my Patreon page. And if you want to stay tuned for the latest news and updates, head over to my Facebook page. This is Danny signing out. Now it's time to decide which of these two board games I'm going to play, or maybe I will play both. See you soon, guys. Bye.